I've got the airplane, so you just relax a bit. In this lesson, we're going to land back at Bremerton National Airport. It's almost dinner time, and I hear they have some pretty good fish and chips there. You already did one landing back in the intro flight. Today, we're going to do several more, but we're going to learn a great deal more about what's going on. I've configured the airplane for a descent at 75 knots with 10 degrees of flaps, which will be our final configuration for landing on this approach. We'll land without full flaps on this demonstration. I think it's time for you to take the controls. Notice that our power setting is 1900 RPM. This allows us to descend at a 500 foot per minute descent rate. I'm adjusting the pitch to maintain 75 knots. If at any time I thought I was too high, I'd reduce the power, perhaps a few hundred RPMs at first. If I thought I was too low, I'd add power, perhaps a few hundred RPMs initially. Yes, I'd always readjust my pitch to maintain precisely 75 knots. The question is, how do you know if you're too high or too low? You may have noticed the hoops we're flying through. That's a device used in Flight Simulator to help pilots become familiar with the maneuvers required for landing. As long as we stay inside those hoops, we will land right on the runway. Don't worry about hitting them. They're magic hoops and they won't hurt us. Ordinarily, we'd fly a standard rectangular traffic pattern to approach Bremerton and land, but today we have a clearance for a straight-in approach. Of course, the key to making your first landing a good one is to let me, your instructor, help you, which I'll gladly do. You will, however, do the most important part, and that is the landing flare. In the meantime, understand that the secret to landing any airplane is to keep from working too hard. When you have the airplane properly trimmed for the right airspeed, and you keep the wings level and make small adjustments to power, the airplane will practically land itself. We'll maintain this speed until we're past the threshold and are at 10 to 15 feet above the runway. Then, reduce the power and flare the airplane for landing. Don't worry, I'll talk you through the flare. In the meantime, to flare means to raise the pitch of the airplane just enough so that the main landing gear touches down before the nose gear does. You'll do this by reducing power and pulling back slightly so the VSI shows no more than a 100 foot per minute descent rate. Then, as the airplane slows further, you'll raise the nose to a 14-degree nose-up pitch attitude and hold the nose there until the main wheels touch down. See the beginning of the runway? That's the runway threshold. You always want to land beyond the threshold. We're coming up on flare height. As you approach within 100 feet of the runway, resist the temptation to start pulling back. This is a common problem with students during their first few attempts at landing. Wait until you're at flare height to start pulling back on the joystick. We're now at flare height. Reduce the power all the way to idle and raise the nose slightly to slow our descent rate to less than 100 feet per minute. As the airplane slows down, raise the nose to a 10-degree pitch attitude. Hold the nose there. As soon as we touch down, lower the nose to the ground and activate the brakes by holding down the period key or the trigger on your joystick. We'll stop here on the runway and talk about what we've done. Well done. What we have done here is learned about the PAPI, thresholds, and a little about the landing flare. What we are going to do next is the same approach in landing as before, except without the hoops to fly through. This will teach us to depend on the PAPI and help us to learn what the runway should look like during the approach in case the PAPI is out of service. If you finish the ground school reading on landings, you should be ready to try the second landing lesson. I'll be here waiting for you when you're ready.